dropped them off and left them for my husband to pick up. We did, we annihilated. It was good.
They played well, or?
That's fine.
Okay, I think we're live. All right. Okay, we'll call this meeting to order. Joan, roll call.
Director Hockert.
Here.
Director Kelsenberg.
Here.
Director Petrie.
Here.
Director Porbenny. Director Riley.
Here.
Director Fatava.
Here.
Chair Sherman.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Let's stand for the pledge.
Should we do something about the echo?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we're going to approve tonight's agenda. Sorry, we have a terrible echo in here right now.
Oh, it's coming from there.
Okay, I will make a motion to approve tonight's agenda. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor of approving tonight's agenda, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, and we're going to go ahead with tonight's consent agenda. It's our only item of business. Are we going to, should I read it or are you going to read it? Okay. So we have two items today, payment of invoices, September 24th, 2022 through October 14th, 2022. And item B, Stillwater Area High School FFA trip request to the National FFA Convention in Indianapolis, Indiana. Is there a motion to approve the consent? Director Petrie, and I'll go ahead and second. All those in favor of approving tonight's consent agenda, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, so for tonight's study session, we are reviewing the results of our school board self-evaluation. We have Gail Gilman with MSBA here remotely to facilitate this with us. Welcome, Gail. We appreciate you coming in. And,
Absolutely.
And I will turn the floor over to you.
Okay, thank you, Chair Sherman and Superintendent Funk and board members. It's a privilege and an honor to be here with you this evening to share with you the results of your board self-evaluation and talk in general about the superintendent and board team relationship. The Minnesota School Boards Association would like to thank you for your ongoing commitment to our association as your go-to association, and all of our staff are always here to serve you. So we really appreciate the opportunity to be able to share this tool with you as well. I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. I'm going to do some quick introductions with you as board members as well. We'll talk about the norms for this session, this discussion. We'll talk about the why we are doing this, and then we'll kind of dig right in. So first of all, a little bit about me. I have been at Minnesota School Boards Association since 2017. Prior to that, I spent the majority of my career at the University of Minnesota on staff there. My undergraduate and my master's are in family and youth education, so my entire career has been steeped in education. I spent about 10 years with Minnesota Board on Aging as well. And then my interest in joining the School Boards Association is that, like most of you around the table, I'm a former school board member. I served on the New Ulm Board of Education for 2 terms, and during those years I served as vice chair and also as clerk. And then at that time I was also on our Riverbend Education District Board as well. So really got to get a wonderful taste of the world of being on the Board of Education, and what a wonderful experience it was. And now it's just a great opportunity for me to assist you in your role as well. So one of the tools that MSBA is offering is the school board self-evaluation, and certainly we are recommending that to help move boards to that high-performing role. And as we think about that, I wanted to get to know a little bit about you as team members before I continue on. So maybe we can just go around the table if you can share your name. I think I've met a lot of you before, but maybe not all of you. But if you could share your name and number of years you've been on the board. I'm not sure, is there anybody where it's just months on the board or not? Maybe? Okay, all right. So name, number of years on the board, and one thing that you're particularly proud of within the Stillwater School District. So Director Riley, I can see you on my left. Would you be willing to start?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Tina Riley. I am in my 4th year on the board, so my final year of my service. I am not running for reelection. One thing that Stillwater has that is really amazing, just one thing, I will say the community support around the school experience.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Director Riley. We'll continue around the table.
Hi, I'm Pete. I'm Pete Kelsenberg. I've been on the board for 1 year, and I am up for reelection because that 1 year was filling a vacancy.
Okay.
And so it's election for a 4-year seat. And I'm proud of the Stillwater, just history of excellence in so many things that they do, be it the sports, not just one particular area, but in all areas they excel. So I'm proud of that.
Okay, thank you. Next.
Mike Funk, Superintendent. I've been here since July 1, and I'm also just proud of the level of support and pride of the community towards the Stillwater District.
Thank you.
All right, I'll go next. I'm Katie Hackert, and I am finishing the 2nd year of a 4-year term. So I am not up for reelection since we're talking about that. So I'll be around for a little longer. And one thing that I am proud of in our district, well, I have 2 kids in the district. They're in 5th grade right now. And one thing that I hear from parents and neighbors is how much they love the teachers and how much the teachers really support our kids and really don't just educate our kids, but really love our kids. And that is tangible for the families going through the system. So that's something that is very special about this district.
Okay, thank you.
Great. And Gail, I should let you know that Director Porbeni will be coming in just a few minutes late, so you might see her enter in. But
Okay.
so
Perfect.
that's
Thank
why
you.
we skipped that. But my name is Allison Sherman. I was elected in 2020 for a special election, and so I'm running for re-election for a 4-year term. But I'm finishing up my special term here for 2 years. Something I think is special. I mean, I think everything that's been reiterated here, the pony pride is throughout at all levels, the students, the community, the teachers, and it manifests itself differently for all of our stakeholders. We have business owners that support us tremendously, our students who are just so passionate, same with community members, and our teachers are second to none. So, and all of our staff really is so dedicated.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Bev Petrie. I'm approaching the end of my 2 years on the board, and I am running for reelection. And I agree with everything that's been said so far. There's just a lot of things to be proud of in this district, and I just kind of want to call out our arts programs and music programs. We have exceptional music programs. We have an exceptional theater department here. We have exceptional art department. It's one of those special things that I think everybody in the community sort of rallies around.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Vivian Vadava. I'm finishing, I was appointed. I'm finishing my 1-year appointment, and I'm not running for reelection. I think I'm proud of, I would have said what Bev kind of said.
Sorry.
Both of my kids were in the music program, and it really made a difference to them. But there also have been particular teachers who have made a huge difference to my kids, and I just really appreciate that. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Good to hear that there are so many positive things at your school district, and I'm not surprised because in my work, when I ask the same question, I hear lots and lots of things that you're really proud of in all the districts around the state. So lots of fun things to hear about you. So as the norms for us meeting this evening, remember that the competence is in the group, so you'll likely get out of it what you put in it. trust your fellow board members. As the second one, trust your fellow board members that they'll be open and honest and respectful discussion. The third one is listen for understanding, especially as we walk through the results of your assessment. Also, do your best to remain curious. Ask questions, wonder why. If you're feeling one way and a fellow board member is feeling another way or has a different interpretation, remain curious about that. And then lastly, the one that to me I think is most important is to recognize your commitment. Thank you for taking the role of board member to represent your community, to represent your school, and to support students throughout your school district. Having worn that same hat, I know that it is a large responsibility. You have probably walked through more challenging things than I ever had to deal with cumulatively in my years on the board. So hats off to you, and pat yourselves on the back. Sometimes as board members, we don't get those kudos as much as we really deserve them because you put your heart and soul into it, I know, and some blood, sweat, and tears right along with it. So thank you so much for the work that you do. So with that, why do a school board self-evaluation? Do any of you have any thoughts on that? Why do a board self-evaluation? Where was the group, what were your thoughts as you discussed participating in this? Sure. Director Batava?
I think one of my main goals was we have a new superintendent and he wanted to get to know the board better, and I think this was going to help him, and so that was my main impetus in doing this.
Okay. Your superintendent gave you some very good advice suggesting that. Thank you. Any other thoughts about why do this?
I was just going to say for myself, I think we are a very new board. I mean, I think our most senior member is just finishing up her first term. And so I think as we have a lot to learn, and we probably don't even know what we don't know yet. And so as we strive to I think we owe it to the community to keep striving towards better governance. And so that's kind of why I'm here, is to learn and to grow and to develop as board members.
Absolutely. Thank you. Anyone else want to comment? Director Riley.
Personally, and this isn't the first one I've done. I've done them prior, being on the board a little bit longer. But for me, it's an opportunity for self-reflection and to understand my board partners a little bit better as we make decisions moving forward.
Absolutely. Good. Thank you. Anyone else want to comment? Director Petrie.
I would just say that it's hard to get better at what you do if you don't reflect and analyze how you're doing what you're doing. And I think that this sort of a structured process gives all of us together an opportunity to address that and try to figure out how we can be a better board.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anyone else? In addition to that, all your comments are perfect. They're spot on. And in addition to that, some things that I see is this is an opportunity for you to align goals, your board goals, as you move forward. We'll talk more about goals in a little bit. This is also an opportunity for you to set a precedence. We know that as board members, your one responsibility for evaluation is your superintendent. Your superintendent provides the overall leadership to ensure that all other staff members are evaluated. So for you to take the time to do this, it really does set a precedence to everyone throughout your school community to say that we take our role really seriously. So we're going to take some time, at least once a year, to reflect. I like the term Director Riley used, to reflect on the work that you're doing. And so I think this is a great opportunity for that. It certainly strengthens the board superintendent team relationship as well. And if there's nothing else that ends from this process, is that you are a team. You are a board superintendent team. As board members, you cannot function without Superintendent Funk, and Superintendent Funk cannot operate and function without your governance role that you play as well. So it's really a good opportunity to strengthen that. And then probably a last one is it just builds a really strong foundation for you as a team. Just like building a house, rather than the house of cards or building the house on the sand, you're building that really strong foundation. So those are some of the whys of why you do take time out of your schedule to do the board self-evaluation. And I'm really proud of you that you did that. I have to say that in the years I was on the board in New Ulm, we did not take the time to do that. And as I look back, I'm like, wow, we were remiss in that. I can think of times, and we functioned quite well, but I can think of times where it really would have been a benefit to us. So anyway, so that's the why. And then the things that we're going to walk through this evening. First, I'm going to set the stage with 3 items. One is the stages of board development. The other one is the board governance model. And then the next one is the goal alignment for school districts. After that, I'm going to segue into the 5 standards of board leadership, and I'll explain why we're linking that in as well. And then we'll start walking through your board self-evaluation. And what you'll find is that this is real free-flowing. So if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand or just simply interrupt if I'm not paying attention, if I miss it. Or Chair Sherman, I'll let you monitor in the room too if there's someone who's trying to get my attention. But I do want to make sure that as we leave here, you feel like you have had a chance to share your thoughts, your ideas, ask questions, and feel like you have come away with some things that, again, you can reflect upon as a board superintendent team. So with that, any questions that anybody has as we get started? Okay.
No questions.
Yep, go ahead.
No, I was
questions.
just going to say there's no one raising their hand here, so we're good.
Okay, sounds good. Perfect. So I am going to do a screen share and put the stages of board development up. And I do want to do a shout out while I'm thinking of it to Joan and also to John, who met me at 6 o'clock today and got me all set up with making sure screen share worked and the audio worked and everything like that. And then thank you for making sure that with Joan, I know that she gave you a hard copy of the self-evaluation that we'll be looking at in just a little bit. So as we think of the 5 stages of board development, and you can see them on the screen right now, and if you have I didn't pay attention, if you have your devices open, you probably have those as well in front of you. But I'm going to start on the circle with the word forming. So forming, storming, norming, performing, and then deforming. I like the term reforming. This is a copyrighted document, so I can't change the words on it, but that would be my interpretation, and especially from my personal experience too, as a board member and from working with boards. And so as you think about the forming, and forming is something that you actually have been doing each of the last few years because of the number of years that you have been serving on the board. I can tell that you continually had new board members over the past few years, and then in the past 6 months, a new leader, your new superintendent as well. So forming is really that time of orientation. This is when the group comes together and gets to know one another and start that formation as a group. And at this point in time, usually there's high expectations. I come onto the board because I've got a mission. I'm thinking you probably all did. I know I had when I joined the board. And it's also a time of anxiety, like what did I get myself into? And uncertainty of just learning the roles and responsibilities. At this stage of the game, in the forming stage, there's lots of questions. There's sometimes hesitation on participation, sometimes frustration as well. I think for me, there were so many things I wanted to know about. I had so many questions, and I probably wore somebody out, probably the superintendent or the business manager with my questions. But anyway, that's the forming stage. I'm going to do a description of each of these, and then as I do, think about where you are at as a board, and we'll have a chance for you to just share some thoughts on that as well. From forming, boards usually transition into storming. Sometimes this is a time of dissatisfaction. It might be chaotic, might be kind of a trial of the group process. The anxiety still continues. Sometimes this is an us versus them. Sometimes it's individual competition. And sometimes there's some disagreements and maybe some criticism of board members. Remember, you don't want to avoid conflict. Conflict is normal, but it does need to be respectful. And it really is important for all of us as board members to model good boardsmanship or positive boardsmanship and good behavior as you're resolving conflict and making decisions. The third phase or the third stage is norming. And this is when things kind of start to settle in. You get to be a little bit more comfortable in your role. You go from me to we at this stage of the game. You're now feeling like you're part of a team, and you realize that you're part of a team, especially as it pertains to being on a school board. You recognize the strengths of your fellow board members, and you recognize some of the limitations. We all have some limitations. I was known for one that, I had strengths in some of the curriculum, but maybe when it came to finances, that wasn't the thing that I was as strong in, and yet I had fellow board members who had the opposite skills. So at this point, it's a time where everybody is contributing. There's a lot more productivity, and the norms of working together start to develop. Performing is the location or the place, the stage that you want to be in. High productivity, the group is really practicing that craft, becoming effective in meeting your objectives. It's a sense of satisfaction, kind of a mindset that differences are okay and are actually an asset. Commitment is really high on the board. Goals are clear. There's less conflict. Team is making progress towards their goals. So lots of productivity. And then in the deforming or reforming stage, and actually as director, you've got two board members that are not continuing. And so you are going to start this reforming stage where you're a process of saying goodbye to some board members and then welcoming new board members. And I think when you're doing this process of winding down, of saying goodbye, embrace that, because the board members who are leaving have given an awful lot to the school district, no matter if they've been on 1 year or 5 years or 25 years. So embrace that. Take some time to say goodbye. And for the board members that are continuing, it's a time of transitioning, probably some anxiety again too, of knowing that you will have new team members. So those are the 5 stages of board development with a little bit of description. As you think about those, where do you see yourselves right now? What reactions do you have to those stages of board development?
I was just going to say, I feel like, can you be in more than one? I don't know. I feel like it depends on we have a new superintendent, so we're still in that forming, but I think we're in others too at the same time.
Absolutely. You certainly can be in more stages, and oftentimes boards, a very seasoned board will even say that they move through the stages. So it's possible to be in multiple stages. It's possible to jump ahead and then jump back again. Other observations, comments, reflections?
I think we're in the performing stage as well.
Okay.
We've been doing a lot of work.
Greetings, Director Corbeni. I did not see you come in because I had the screen share. My name is Gail Gilman. I serve as Director of Strategic Planning and Board Leadership with Minnesota School Boards Association. So I'm happy to meet you and happy to be working with your board superintendent team this evening.
Definitely, same here. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you for your comments too. Thank you. Other reflections, other thoughts? Director Riley.
I don't think we are all in the same place as a board as a whole. I think we are all individually in different areas on the board, and probably because of years of experience of doing the work. Obviously, I'm coming down from it, but there's still a little bit of storming that's going on between some board members, along with the performing, and then again, I'm getting ready to deform, so.
You're going to reform, no. Yes.
Yes, so
Thank you.
I think not everybody is in the same place in here.
Good observation, and I would think that would be very, very normal for the years of service that this group has and for the things that you've described as well. So thank you for that. Anyone else? Director Kelsenberg.
Sure. I'm imagining that of course, you want to be in that performing stage as much as possible.
Right.
And anytime you're not in that performing stage, you're looking at those other things and just trying to circle back as quickly as you can. But I would imagine you'd go in and out of that stage quite a bit. Kind of like Director Riley just said, you're various people in different places. But I imagine you're going out, you're coming home, you're going out, you're coming home, and you want to hang out in that performing stage. Do you usually see boards kind of there 90% of the time, or how long does that circle last to get back to the performing?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. There is really no good answer for that. It depends upon the makeup of the board superintendent team. So sometimes it takes a long time to get back into that performing stage. Sometimes the team can jump around, and sometimes there's some boards I've worked with where they are high performing, and every time I interact with them, they are high performing with very few moves between the different stages. So I think probably the key is to recognize that those stages are there, and that your goal is always to be in that performing stage and high productivity. And when you're not, to reflect that, to acknowledge that, and then to talk about how can we get back in sync again as quickly as possible. Any other thoughts? Any other questions? Okay, I am going to do a screen share again, and this time I'm going to put up the board governance model. And the board governance model is something that you get to see in phase 1 and phase 2 when you're a new board member, and we share it in phase 3, the high performing board, and it's posted on our website. And whenever we meet with boards, we always like to share this as well. And I include this in when I'm doing strategic planning with all the school districts as well, so to not only remind board members of the role, but to help the community understand what the board's role is as well. So just a quick review of the board governance model. In the upper left-hand corner, the board governs. Your role as a board member is to set expectations and parameters. And then in the lower right-hand corner, the superintendent manages, provides the leadership and the supervision. At the top of the circle, the 12 o'clock spot, we have the word establish. So the board is responsible for establishing, adopting, and evaluating. Under establishing, it's as board members, you set expectations, you set the parameters, and you have a strategic plan in place that gives you your strategic direction for the future. And then once you've got that strategic plan in place with those goals, you adopt policies, you adopt policies to govern with, you set a budget to operate with, and you identify the contracts for services of all sorts. And then once you've done that, the responsibility becomes that of your superintendent, who develops the plans, the procedures, the staff, implements the plans, procedures, policies, and does a monitoring of those. And then you can see as the circle goes around, the other key responsibility you as board members have is to evaluate yourselves and the superintendent, and to identify outcomes for your work. The lines, the little arrows go between, because this is fluid. So it's not that you just set the expectations and hand everything over and never to be talked about again, or the same with a strategic plan or with a budget. Your superintendent and staff are always going to be coming back, having additional conversations with you about it. The key takeaway is that center circle, student achievement for all. That's what you're all about, and keeping that in mind. Anybody have any comments about the board governance model or questions? Okay. Excuse me, picked up some kind of a cold this past week. So the next diagram that I'd like to share is part of the why with this board self-evaluation as well. Having goal alignment in your school district and governing underneath that, or as a result of that. So at the on the top of the umbrella, the district goals, your strategic plan, having the district goals in place, and then those goals align to the board's goals, the superintendent goals, and then also align with building and site goals, staff goals, classroom goals, and student goals. So part of this board self-evaluation is to help you talk about what your goals are so that you can then move towards this goal alignment. Anybody have any questions or any thoughts about that? Okay. Well, those are just some background documents that I wanted to share to set the stage. Then I'm going to move on to the standards for board leadership. And again, you get to see this in your Phase 1 manual. You also get to see it in Phase 3, and it's posted on our MSBA website. So the standards for board leadership, there are 5 of them. And the first one is conduct and ethics. Conduct and ethics is how you as a board superintendent team work together, make decisions together, discuss things together, ponder things together, trust one another, respect one another. So it's how you operate as a board team. The second standard is vision, and vision is having that clear picture of what the future is, that strategic direction, if you will, the goals for the upcoming years and for all students, all staff, making sure you have a strategic plan in place and monitoring the strategic plan. So those are some of the parts of vision. Structure includes the organizational and the physical structure. So the physical structures are the buildings that you have, and indoor and outdoor facilities. And the organizational structures are superintendent in place, staff in place, curriculum in place, and technology in place. So that is structure. And then standard number 4 is accountability. It's really being accountable to the community and monitoring the conditions of the school as a whole. And here we look a lot at student achievement under accountability. And then the 5th one is advocacy and communication. And it is telling the story of your school district. I also say being a cheerleader for your school as well. And if you feel like you can't be the cheerleader or the advocate for your school, you might want to consider whether you're a right fit for being on the school board as well. I always say if board members can't tell the story and can't be advocates for the school, I don't know who else is going to do it. You really are the leaders for that. So those are the 5 standards. And the reason that I wanted to share that document with you is you'll notice under each of the headings there are benchmarks. A through E, A through D, A through F, A through E, A through H. Those benchmarks were the questions on the board self-evaluation. So I wanted to set that as the tone for you as we now transition into the board self-evaluation. Any questions about those standards? Okay, so as we begin to take, go ahead.
I just have a comment on some of this.
Absolutely.
For instance, the standard 1, conduct and ethics, and
Mm-hmm.
you go down into D and it says speak with one voice after reaching a decision. And I struggle with that because this district has already had a memorandum by its legal saying that that is not constitutionally appropriate. And that board members are allowed to speak with dissenting opinions even after a decision has been made. And I guess what concerns me is that when we put things like this into the documentation, it lends to confusion amongst board members and community members, and can create environments that are inappropriate. For instance, I myself had to secure my own legal team because this board brought back old unconstitutional policies And I was concerned that they were going to try to throw me off the board. And so by putting this kind of language, I think it really does a disservice to the board members, especially when you know that it's constitutionally inappropriate.
I appreciate that feedback. Does anyone else want to comment? Go ahead.
I guess it is true that we did at one time get this advisory from an attorney. But an advisory is not really law. Unless there's a court case that establishes that that's actually the truth of the matter, then essentially that's just an opinion of one attorney. And I know that when the MSBA does all this documentation, they have attorneys on staff. I mean, if that was truly unconstitutional, I would think that their attorneys would have flagged it. So I think that perhaps that issue is a little bit up in the air.
Thank you. Anybody else want to weigh in? Comment?
Oh, Superintendent Funk would like to.
Go ahead.
I think a key point here is, if you're looking at Standard 1, Conduct and Ethics, the slide says what an effective, high-performing school board strives to do. It doesn't mandate that members, have to speak with one voice. Is it a best practice? And as an experienced superintendent, yes, it is. But there's nothing that mandates that they speak with one voice after reaching a decision. So I think it's important to make that clarification.
Thank you for that. Anyone else? And I do think it is just that. It is a best practice, and I think what we have found is that when you can thoroughly discuss and review a topic, an issue, a subject, or make on a decision, when you come to consensus, we might not all agree, and boy, when I was on the board, we didn't all always agree as well. But I think that when you're moving towards that high-performing board, then you accept that it is the decision of the majority, and then you move ahead, and certainly not finding ways to dismantle that decision. But I appreciate all the comments. Anybody else want?
I have
Go ahead.
a comment, I guess. I think sometimes that speak with one voice after reaching a decision has been used to have a majority of people decide what they want the decision to be and then not really listen to the rest of the board. So then it's like speaking with one voice before everyone's really weighed in, and I think that's a problem.
And I would agree, that would be a problem. It does seem that you would all have wanted to have a discussion about whatever is being shared. Okay. Well, thank you for the questions and the comments. I appreciate that. And again, the point of this one is just to let you know that these benchmarks are the questions on the board self-evaluation. So you'll see these come up again in just a little bit. So with the self-assessment, and MSBA started offering us this assessment in, I think it was in 2017. And we've had a lot of schools that have participated in this over the years. And just to set the tone for the assessment itself, first of all, there is no pass or fail on this. There is no grade on the board assessment. There was no right or wrong answer. It really was your reflection of the statement at the time that you took this, and all of you took this within, I think it's been the last couple of months. It is, again, based on the 5 standards. It's more about looking at your strengths, and what you're going to see and what we're going to talk about is how many strengths this team has. And it's also about looking at opportunities. There's going to be a few things that we'll talk about that you'll say, that's something that we could discuss at a future date. It's something that could be a goal, an internal goal for us to work on in the next year. And so look at it mostly as the strengths, because there are a lot of them here. The tool is also longitudinal. So you'll notice on the cover page, it's got Stillwater Area 2022. MSBA recommends that you take something like this on an annual basis. You can do it with the facilitation like I'm doing this evening, or you can do it without. And so each year that you take it, you'll have your results from the previous years, and you can start watching some of the movement, the trends as well with your board superintendent team. Another question that comes up is, there were no open-ended questions, and I wanted to make a particular statement about something, and that was by design. By the way, the tool itself was one that we purchased the copyright from Washington State School Directors Association because their standards align with ours, and so we can't make changes in any of the questions. That's why sometimes you'll see a word that policy gets used a lot when it's probably more procedure, but we'll talk about that. And then the other thing is with open-ended questions, so we weren't given the opportunity to do that because of the copyright, and that's really why we're having the discussion this evening as well. Okay. What I think I might do so that I can see all of you, I think all of you have a copy of the self-evaluation in front of you. Are you okay if I stop the screen share and just walk you through the pages? Is that okay with everybody?
Yep. Yes.
Okay, perfect. And then I will get the view of the room. Okay, I will, as we walk through this, I'm going to start with the fourth page in, which is called the overview report. It's kind of the executive summary, if you will, for the self-evaluation. You're going to see me taking notes because my intent is that after your discussion this evening, there'll be a summary that I will provide for you. I'll mail it to Superintendent Funk and Chair Sherman, and then they can bring it back at another meeting, another study session for your consideration if there are some things that you would like to work on just as a team in this next year. So with that, on the fourth page in the overview report, you'll see that down the left-hand side are the 5 standards. The horizontal bar graph then shows the results from 2022. If this were your second or third year, you'd see the other years on here as well. In the green, you see the percentage of responses for always. In the blue, the most of the time. The yellow, some of the time. The red is never, and the black is don't know. And what I usually look at, and I never send these out to a school district without looking at them first in case there are any concerns, any red flags. What I always do is I look at the number of responses that are always or most of the time, so the green and the blue. And that's really your goal, is to move to that high-performing stage where you can say always or most of the time for each of the benchmarks. If there's a lot of responses that are yellow some of the time, my question or your question should be, how can we move that to always or most of the time? If there are questions or responses that are in red, never, the question, and we'll see some of those tonight, the question is this really something that never happens or is never done by the board? Or is it happening and we just haven't seen it happen yet? Especially for board members who have been on 1 or 2 years, there's a number of things. We always say the learning curve is about 3 years on the board. And so maybe you just haven't seen it. So that's why it feels like it's a never. If it's a don't know, that is an opportunity for learning. And we'll talk about those don't knows tonight. And these will be things where, again, in my notes, as I summarize them, we'll talk about some learning opportunities where at another study session, maybe there's something about the hiring process that you'd like to know, or staff evaluations or something like that. And so, again, the goal is to move into that always, most of the time. What I have found, and this is absolutely not research-based, but in my experience, is where I interact with boards where they're always and most of the time are 50% or greater. They just seem to be a much more high-performing board. Sometimes there's a lot of never or don't know because you have a lot of new board members, and a lot of our school districts have that right now, and I think that's going to happen even more after the next election with all the open positions around the state. So it just means that you've got your work to do on that. And in your case, as I started adding up under conduct and ethics, you're at 52%, vision 46%, structure 47%, accountability 42%, and advocacy and communication 56%. So, all in all, considering the fact that you are a much younger board, so to speak, with a new superintendent, this is not surprising. And in fact, I think you should probably be pretty proud of yourself for these responses. It shows that those of you that are on the board were quick understudies, and you've had some good leadership along the line here to bring you all together. The responses are listed in percentages. When we get to the next page and through the rest of the document, the responses will be in numbers. So you'll see, two said always, 3 said most of the time, so on and so forth. The reason we calculate these in percentages is because those benchmarks differed in number. Remember, they were A through F, A through H, A through E, A through D. So to make this graph look like apples and apples, we needed to calculate these in percentages rather than the exact numbers. I'm going to pause for a second. What questions do you have about the overview? Anything come to your mind? Or okay. I will continue on, and if there is something that you want to go back to, just let me know, and I'm happy to do that. So as we start moving into the assessment on page 5, the format is the same with each page. You'll have the standard number 1, conduct and ethics. This will share with you the benchmark. So this benchmark is conducting board and district business in a fair, respectful, and responsible manner. And you can see your number of responses for each of those 2 questions. And what I have done prior to meeting with you is I've walked through every page and I've made notations of things that if you don't raise questions about, I probably will. And this was not one of those pages. I think you are all on the same page here with each of those questions. But I'm going to ask, is there any question or comment that you want to make about statements 3 and 4? Okay. Then as we move on to page 6, on this one, there are 3 questions that I circled, and they were 6, 7, and 8. We're still doing conduct and ethics. We're on a new benchmark now about being accountable and open to the public. And with this, what I wanted to make sure we acknowledged is that there were 2 people that said never on here. And for question 6, following a defined process for gathering input prior to making a critical decision. So what we're looking at with this one is what I call the critical decisions, the big decisions, bond, levy, facilities, major change in curriculum, closing a building. The list could go on and on. So right now, what kind of a process do you use as a team? How do you make those big decisions? If it was going to be a building project, how would that all come into place? What's been past practice?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I guess I can only draw upon the biggest experience that I think that this board was a part of was the levy and the bond. And
Okay.
so it was, and I think, not everyone at this table was here for that, but, it was extensive conversations.
Yep.
Surveying a couple different surveys of the community, and that would span over, maybe even over a year, followed by discussions and conversations and overlaying that with budgets from staff and priorities, and then leading up to a decision. But I guess my only experience on those big discussions has been that the operating levy and the technology levy. And then obviously the superintendent hire is the other big process, which I feel like we
Right.
had a very formal process in place because we had Barb at MSBA kind of helping lead us through that process. And it was very open and transparent, and again, included the community. So I feel like the big decisions this board has been making has had that process. But I guess, and honestly, I think that some of I would differ from some of the big decisions the board makes, but maybe just the process of understanding how staff makes their decisions might be helpful for me as a board member. We've had just a lot of superintendent changes over the years in Stillwater, and so I think that when the leadership at superintendent, it's like changing your CEO. There's different processes in place that CEO is going to kind of implement. And so, I think that's why we're here today, to kind of try to talk through some of that as well. Sure. Yes, Superintendent Funk.
So, just, Gail, the reason I was interested in doing this is really to take a look at question 6 there. All right, we're 2-2-2-2. Okay, so, I'm just curious, I don't know how free-flowing you want this, but I'm just curious to hear from the board. We are all over the board on that one, so.
What else would you like? Yes, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yep.
Director Riley, you've got your hand raised. Comments?
I think for me, some of the processes I've seen over the years, so we initially, when I started on, we developed a community engagement committee and to try to become involved. And then this board came on and got rid of the community engagement committee. And so we don't do that anymore. And then there are, even with the process of the community design team and then bringing, that was supposed to be a board-driven experience, and then it got to be a 70% attrition rate from the community. And so I just think that in my personal perspective, that there's been a lot of change and no stability with the path going forward. And I would also like to see people invited to the table, maybe that haven't been there to the table before, that we have different representation, and that we truly engage and don't come to the table with preconceived or predetermined answers. And so I feel that, and this is all my perspective, but I feel that in the past, the administration makes its decision of what it wants to do and then guides the direction of these committees and these community members to get to the decision administration wants, rather than it being organic.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. Anyone else like to comment?
Could I just jump in quick? Just a clarification. Sure. We didn't get rid of the Community Engagement Committee. It's just an ad hoc committee. So it still exists. We just have to, as a board, decide the particular projects for that committee. But yes, there was discussion of getting rid of it. We just decided not to. And just kind of my 2 cents on the whole defined process. Again, I've been here for 2 years, so the levy and the superintendent search have been the 2 kind of big ones that I've gone through. And in both of those big processes, I've found hiring consultants and having someone come in and help us go through that process and soliciting information from our community, doing surveys as an outside source became really helpful in guiding our discussions as a board and kind of helping us come to an objective decision together, where it's not necessarily being guided from internally, and so that you can't. So at least in my experience, it did not feel like it was being, any strings were being pulled from inside, if you kind of get where I'm going. So at least from my experience, I've been really happy with the processes we've had through these big decisions. But of course, I've only been here for 2 years, so I don't have necessarily the experience and the history of making decisions on a board beyond that. So.
Okay. Appreciate Director Benny.
Thank you. I agree with you, Director Hackett. I think this board has really made a conscious effort to engage the community. I don't think I've seen a board that has engaged the community as much as this board has. And the stability within the board also is quite obvious. We know there's nothing we do on the board without community's involvement. And like Director Harkett said, we include everyone. We do surveys. We ask for community voices. There's been great participation in terms of how the community engages with the board. And you can tell, I mean, prior board, this place would have been filled up with all sorts of complaints. And we do have the kind of stability that we've been seeking for on this board, and that's the reason why we're able to do things and succeed, because collectively, we put the students first. And that's the reason why things have actually worked. Just barely 2 years that most of us have been on the board.
Okay, thank you. Director Petrie.
I guess I just want to, this question tripped me up just a little bit, just because I was trying to, and probably overthinking it, but I was trying to figure out when you were saying a defined process, you know, did it mean that we had a specific way to go about gathering input before making all of our decisions? And so, I don't know, I was overthinking that one, but I do think that we, you know, one of the things that we've been really careful about is to make sure that we do not make decisions, that we don't bring up a topic in a meeting and then make a decision on it later on in the meeting. That was something that we had actually quite a bit of discussion about at one of our policy meetings, that this is a way that disenfranchises our community, and we wanted to make sure that we were not doing anything like that. But I do have to say that we have, you know, we encourage people to come to our meetings and speak to us. We encourage people to email us and let us know what they think. And certainly when we had the mask situation last fall, we heard from hundreds of people. And so we had a lot of input, and frankly, I was really grateful for it, because there were emails that we got on that topic with points of view that I had not really considered before. And so it's really important for us to hear all that input from the community.
Okay, thank you. Director Bovada.
I guess I have something to say about, like, I mean, I do think we do gather input, but I think sometimes it's a little backwards in that we might bring up a subject in a meeting, and then we'll have open forum just at the very beginning of a meeting. So whatever subject we bring up at a meeting, the open forum's already done. And then the next meeting, if we're going to make a decision, the open forum when people might talk about the subject is in the beginning of the meeting, but then we just vote on it, and we don't really, you know, I mean, the interaction is kind of like not very, I don't think that works very well. I don't think it's on purpose, but it just doesn't, you know, like someone might say something and then you're not supposed to respond to them, but then you're going to just vote on stuff, and I don't, that I found disturbing.
Okay, thank you. Oh, I appreciate all the comments and all the feedback. I think the takeaway on this one is to have some type of a process, and it's going to vary depending upon the topic. If you're talking about a minor change, you're going to have a process where you'll probably talk about it maybe at a board work session or study session, learning session, and then bring it back to a board meeting and make a decision. If it's a large, you know, the superintendent hire, if it's the bond, going out for a bond, you're going to put a lot more time and energy. The bottom line is for the large decisions, the critical decisions, they shouldn't just come to the board table tonight and you really don't have any background, there hasn't been much discussion, and you make a decision. And I know that hasn't happened here. There are some school districts where I've seen some things like that happen. So I think that's what that's getting at, is to make sure that you have that process. I also think it's important to look to your superintendent to help identify what that process should be. He knows what the big ticket items are, what the, you know, the key items are where you need lots of feedback, and sometimes he's probably going to ask you, you know, here, what kinds of things would you like to know as we pull this together for you? So, Director Riley.
I'd just like to say that I think things have improved on this respect since I had started. When I had started on the board 4 years ago, I did not get information I needed to vote. And for me, I can't vote on something unless I can stand behind what I'm voting on. And so information sharing has gotten better. This was a big topic a year ago on how the board is to be provided information before something comes forward, whether it's a contract that we need to view, whether it's the disbursements, whatever it may be. But I do think that that part has gotten better from administration, information to the board.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to keep us moving along here. As I look at the same page with question 7 and question 8, carrying out the annual assessment, that's exactly what you're doing this evening. So if you continue to take this, you will probably always be answering always. And likewise with question 8, setting goals. So as I said, I will put a summary together, and those will be some things that you can look at to set a goal or two that you'd like to work on in the coming year. So those responses will probably look a little bit different in the next time you take this. I'm going to move us along to page 7, and again, feel free to interrupt at any time. The question on page 7 that I was going to comment on, and this is a new benchmark now with respecting, advocating, mutual understanding of roles and responsibilities. Question that I am interested in and wanted to comment on is 11, using written protocols for your interactions. And what we mean by written protocols is those unspoken things that boards decide. So it complements your code of ethics, your policy 209, but it might be things in the protocols of how do you respond to emails? When emails come to the entire board, who responds? If the emails come to the board chair, how does that happen? Using only your school district email address. If you're not using your school district email address for school business, you maybe want to be doing that and not use your personal emails. Things like, how are board committees set up? Is it I stay on the committee until I don't want to be on the committee anymore, and then a new board member can join on that committee? Does the chair set all the committees? How does that happen? It's things like that. Who is authorized to talk to legal counsel? Who talks to the media? How do you address one another at the board table? Protocol, Director Sherman, Superintendent Funk, having that professional protocol. Not all boards do that. They're on a first name basis. Sometimes it's nice to use a professional protocol because there's going to be times when you may need it, and you may have experienced that too in the past. Orientation of new board members would be another thing. So what are some of those unwritten things that you probably do that could be written down? And the reason that you might want to have those written down is because of turnover on the board. So suddenly, and now you've got new board members, you can share that with them. You can review your protocols at your organizational meeting in January and come to agreement on all those protocols. And then you've got them in writing. I had a board that I worked with recently where they had a long-time board member, I think somebody who'd been on like 25 years, and they actually wrote the written protocols, which was a great thing. And thank goodness, because that person is no longer on the board. I think decided not to run again or something. And the rest of the board were very, very new. So without that seasoned board member, all that institutional knowledge of board work was gone. So I'm not sure if you have something like that in writing now. And I see the don't knows or the never. So that was one of the reasons I wanted to make sure and talk about that.
I'll let Director Hocker take some of that from policies.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're highlighting something that we in the policy committee kind of realized when we were going through our 200 series. And also as being a bunch of new board members going through board orientation a couple months ago, it's something that we realized is a need that we need to fill, especially coming up with our next elections in November. So back when we were doing the 200 series, we did, as a policy committee, come up with, we surveyed the board to kind of ask what information would be helpful for an orientation, and then we did write up a really detailed list of kind of orientation steps to give to the administration. So
Okay.
we tried to tackle that one. And then
good.
there are definitely other ones that you've brought up that have come up in discussions around policy that I feel like would be really helpful to write down, particularly around the committees. And I've seen other boards have a chart that has kind of all the committees on it. And then as we start our January organizational meeting, kind of review that, allow board members to kind of look it over, see what the commitments are, and have people sign up with a little bit more information than just kind of stabbing in the dark of, that sounds like a great fun for me. So I think that you've hit on a lot of things that we're at least aware of that need some improvement, and some we've already tried to tackle as well.
Okay, perfect. Director Votava.
Yeah, I think you guys did a really good job, having been on the board just an hour, of doing the orientation type stuff. I think that was really well done. I think the committees, definitely need work. I'm on this committee where the meeting that I'm supposed to go to, I work during the day, so I can't ever go to the meeting, it's so things like that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I was just mentioning this to Superintendent Funk, just getting a list of, because I think the committees have just been literally passed down and down and down, and without a lot of understanding of what's the commitment and what's the time frame and exactly what you said. And I've been on that too, where it's like, oh, I didn't realize this was meeting at when I'm not available, or, And so I think, and even internal committees, like where are board members needed on what committees, and so we're trying to kind of organize that so that it's a little bit better for next year. But that did just come up, so.
Okay, great. When I put my summary together, I will share those bullet points. I believe there's about 20 or so that I have in my notes, so that'll give you something to work from. And then you can craft it as you'd like. And I think you've got a great resource in your superintendent too, having worked with other school board or boards, so that he can bring some suggestions of what some of his past experiences have been that the board has used as well. Okay. Go ahead.
One more thing, I just don't think that question's really clear either. I wouldn't have known, using written protocols for its interactions, I wouldn't have known that was how we pick committees, or, it's just not. It's not
right.
clear. The question's not clear.
Good point. Thank you for that. Okay, I'll move us along to page 8. Question 12 talks about governing using policies that align with research-based best practices. And through your association membership at MSBA, that's one of the things you can be assured of. And Terry Morrow, my colleague, is responsible for making sure that once the legislative session has adjourned, that any policies affecting education, he will make sure those policies are developed. He doesn't do them on his own. He works with our MSBA legal counsel as well. So he's worked on them, they've been reviewed, and then they come to you. So that's one of the benefits of your association membership. So you can always be assured that those model policies come to you, and then you can adapt as needed or adopt if they're ready to go for you. The second question I noted here was collaborating. And with this one, as I think about collaborating, there are a lot of opportunities via MSBA to collaborate. As I think about the coffee and conversations that happen, I think about the, now this year we started board chair conversations. I think that's what it's called, the first Wednesday of the month. There's the Friday chats with our governmental relations team. There's the webinars, the third Thursday webinars, summer seminar, leadership conference. The list really goes on and on. Delegate assembly would be another one. So we have built in lots of opportunities for you to interact with colleagues and to collaborate too. We also have our director districts. So your district director is Joel Albright, who is at the Rosemount Apple Valley Egan School District. So if there are things, I know he is staying in touch with you as well. So you do have some of those things built in, along with other opportunities that you might have made available to yourselves. And I will move on unless there are questions. Page 9, we're still under conduct and ethics. This benchmark talks about the healthy relationships. I think the one that I circled is question 17, and that's treating all individuals, including fellow board members, staff, students, community with respect. So I think there's a number of, some of the times there, so might be one of those things that you want to be very intentional about as you move forward, whether it's between board members or staff or students or community members. Any comments or questions on these statements?
Sure.
Okay, go ahead, Director Kelsenberg.
On some of these, it may look like we all really look at it differently, but I would think that some of it, we might just interpret the question differently. So I don't know that we're really that far apart on a lot of these things. It's just reading the question, so. So I think if
Absolutely.
there was something that was really different, then we'd probably dig into how did we understand the question, see if we really are different or not.
Right. Yeah, good point, good point. And again, I think the key ones are probably the nevers and the don't knows. Those are the biggest opportunities for you. But you're right. I think when you're saying some of the time it could just be the interpretation, because we all do interpret the questions a little differently. Very good. Let's see, page 10.
You know, I guess I have something
Go ahead.
else to say. I think
Yes,
a
absolutely.
lot of some of these things maybe were affected by the fact that there was so much unrest in people who were angry. So it kind of limited, it made the board, I think, limit interactions sometimes because the interactions were so
Right.
disruptive. So if they hadn't been disruptive, it would have been easier to have better interactions. But if you have very disruptive people, then and you have to do board work, it's hard to keep your interactions open.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that comment. On page 10, two questions I was going to comment on. One is 19, talking about professional development. And I think for board members, remember that your professional development is as important as your superintendent's professional development, as staff professional development, and the development that we provide for the students in the school as well. So don't be afraid of taking time out. Again, MSBA offers a lot of opportunities with summer seminar and leadership conference, our phases 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you've got some of those built in, and then there are other opportunities that you are likely available to you as well. So again, it really sets an example. Just as you're, wanting your superintendent to have those professional development opportunities and your staff, you're saying that this is a precedence for you as well. You're really modeling that. The other question I was going to comment on is 21, and with that benchmark statement, it talks about the orientation of new board members. And right now, is there some process that you use for orientation? And do you use mentors?
I'll take that one again.
Sure.
Yes,
So-
it's new.
Yes, but it's brand new. And when we did the little survey and then came up with kind of different topics to cover, like before you reach the board, and then right before your first meeting, and then kind of ongoing things to know maybe in your first couple months. That's kind of at least the format that we developed. I don't think we've gone through the whole thing, even though we have 2 brand new board members that we have oriented, and that was kind of our first stab at it. The one thing we did implement was mentorship, that we did create a mentor
Good.
for our new board members, even though we were 1 year in ourselves, but we did our best to try to kind of help just be a sounding board and kind of get them up to date on kind of how the procedures work, how policies work, how just board meetings work, and be available for questions to kind of hopefully make them feel included and part of the board as quickly as possible.
Dr. Funk?
Thank you.
So historically, this question says orientation of new board members together with the superintendent. Historically, what I have done previously, we have the new board members. First thing, I always try to attend the phase 1 and 2 trainings with the new board members so that if there's any questions there, and oftentimes with the board chair as well, just so that, okay, tell me a little bit more about this. But I think more importantly, in addition to that, we have an orientation that we typically do with board members during the day where we bring them in for an afternoon and meet with the administrative team. And really, MSBA talks at the 30,000-foot level, and we try to bring board members into, okay, here's what the budget means in our district. Here are some things we do operationally in our district. Here's curriculum in our district. So really preparing them for when these things come up at meetings, they have at least, they've got the MSBA baseline, but then they also have the district baseline provided by the administration. And I don't know if that's happened here, and so that was probably why I said I don't know on the question here. So, but that's how I feel. As much as the board does, we have a responsibility as administration to ensure that we posture the new board members for success.
I think
Well said.
prior
Director Riley.
to me being on the board, before I started, they used to do that, where they would meet individually with board members, tour,
Yeah.
do all of those things. But since, what was it, 19, that hasn't
Okay.
been.
Oh, actually, I
Melinda
think it
did
has,
that.
yeah.
She
that's
did that.
been
Melinda
happening.
okay, well,
Yeah.
it wasn't when I joined.
Yeah, it happened with us when we joined.
Good.
Of course, it was Zoom at that time.
Sure.
But we were introduced to all of the department heads who then had their, to
Excellent.
tell us, what was happening. And
Good.
we weren't doing tours at that time,
Sure.
but, and you had something similar. and
Yep.
Pete, you did too, correct?
Did you meet with Melinda?
Did you?
And
Yes,
did she
yes.
tour
Yeah,
you around?
right,
Yeah.
right. So, I mean, that
Good.
has been happening, and I'm sure it will
Sure.
continue.
I went to, so much of the MSBA training was Zoom, which, doesn't lend itself really to that, obviously attending together. But I did see at one of the in-person sessions there, I did see superintendents attending with new board members. And I just thought that was a really good idea. So I would love if you did that, because right on the fly, if there's something coming up, I would see the superintendent turning and explaining to their board members, this is how it works in our district. And I think it just brings up those conversations that are really timely that you might not otherwise have.
One thing I liked about the Zoom rather than in person is it actually allowed me to go, because I
Sure.
didn't have to take quite as much time to travel
Right.
somewhere.
Yeah.
Very good. And just a note to that with orientation, there is a document called New Board Member Orientation Year at a Glance, which is in the Phase 1 manual and is also on our MSBA website. And another good tool for orientation is the resource library, which is on our website as well, as you're looking at things that you'd like to share. But I think it sounds like you've got lots of great ideas, and I'm right on track with what probably should be happening. So very good. Okay. Well, that takes us through conduct and ethics, and we can transition into vision. And with the vision, talking about communicating high expectations for student learning with clear goals and plans. That's kind of the overall picture. A lot of the benchmarks here relate to the strategic plan. And so you have to kind of keep that in mind as you're thinking about these responses. The first set of benchmarks on this page talk about student learning, the high expectations, and improving student achievement. And responses are pretty much similar, I think, from this group. And what I found in working with school districts and facilitating their strategic plans, once they've done the strategic plan, have it in place, as they take a look at these questions, they start to move into that always and most of the time, because you'll be focusing on student achievement as one of your high priorities. And then obviously, this is where you'll be emphasizing your work as well. So I don't have any additional comments on page 11. Page 12 talks about including stakeholders when developing your vision or your strategic plan. Question 26 talks about communicating your rationale for decisions to the community, and that can be done in a variety of ways. We can maybe, well, I don't know, do you have any comments about question 26 with the responses there?
I think when I answered, I'll just go back to question 25. I answered, I don't know, just because we haven't done that's kind of on our radar as a
Right.
board goal for this year. So I didn't really know how that's been done necessarily from the inside. I mean, I observed it as a community member, but
Right.
I think that's something that we have to define still as this board and administration, along with the community moving forward, so.
Okay, sounds good. The next page, 13, continues on, and the 3 questions here are really specific to your strategic plan. So as you develop a new strategic plan, talks about, have you done it in collaboration with staff and community or with your stakeholders in creating those goals and outcomes? Once you've got those new goals set, it's likely going to mean that you'll need to direct resources towards them. So the next question ties into policy development, decision-making, and budgeting as they relate to those new goals. And then with a new strategic plan, you're always going to want to monitor the progress on that as well. And that'll be this moving document, moving process where the superintendent will be giving you updates. You'll be taking a deeper dive into whatever a specific focus might be for that year or for even that year or two. So I believe that once you get a new strategic plan in place, your responses are going to look very different in another year if you were to take this again. Any comments?
I also think that, just a comment based on, I had attended a PTA meeting at Lake Elmo last week, and I just thought this would be interesting to share with the board, but I think it relates to this vision, and just hearing the staff there talk about how the tech levy is already really enabling them to have like real-time access to student data related to achievement, related to just a number of different indicators that they need to really be able to hone in on student needs. And so I guess for me, I think that technology levy is also going to play into some of the accountability and some of this, measurements and benchmarks and things like that. I was optimistic, at least when I heard that, what a difference it was making for the staff.
Very good. And I think your comment ties in nicely to question 31 as well. Together with the superintendent, review student
Yes.
achievement regularly. So the outcomes, yep. Very good.
Director
Okay.
Riley?
Really, since I've been on the board, this is the first we've really addressed academic achievement. There has been a bit of a denial in this district and a pushback between the board, since I had joined, had consistently want to move towards better academic achievement. And I think we are finally at a place now where everybody finally understands we're not where we're supposed to be. And I think that is why maybe it seems we're a little bit more together on things now, because now we don't have the pushback from administration and board any longer. And so the community, we did survey, the last survey we did with the community was actually a very good survey. I was really impressed with the report on that, but the community is also on that same page. So I think now that the community, the board, administration, everybody has the same goal in mind, I think that will help unify our district a little bit better. But we're finally at a point in the last 4 years that we all can agree that our academics were not and have not been where they should have been.
Well said, and really that should be your focus. As you think about that board governance model, the student achievement is what's key. And sometimes, and you've had lots of reasons to get off into other topics because of the pandemic and all the things that have impacted our society recently, but definitely wanting to focus on student achievement. I'm going to continue us on to standard number 3 on page 15, and now we've rolled into structure, the physical and the organizational structures. A few things that I commented on. With question 33, we're talking about, it says have policies or procedures really for the management of safety and security. I think the takeaway with facilities, security, safety, those are really things that are the responsibility of your superintendent. He may not do those himself, but there's other staff that will be delegated to. So as board members, you'll just want to ensure that those things are happening. And I know when I was on the board, we get regular updates. So if there were any questions, any concerns, and that was how we handled that. And similar on page 16, it talks about, this is with staff, and hiring, recruiting, evaluating, and then providing staff development. And your responses on here are not unlike a lot of the schools that I work with the don't know. And so the takeaway on this one is, again, these 3 benchmarks are the responsibility of your superintendent and whoever your superintendent delegates that work to. You as a board just want to ensure that it's happening. As new board members, and I remember having some of these questions too, as new board members, you may at some point ask your superintendent or another administrator to come in and just tell you about the hiring process that's used at your school. I was always curious about those things. Is there a process that's being used to retain staff right now? How about the evaluation process? Not, with data privacy, it's not that, I as a board member would want to know what, Mr. Jones's evaluation looked like, but just the process. What does that mean? And staff development, I do believe that you should have a policy related to staff development. And so with that, again, just having that feedback so you have an awareness of what's happening. And if that's something that you're interested in having as a work session at some point, I think that would be fair game. But I'm going to pause on that one and let you weigh in.
Yeah,
Comments?
I think, Dr. Funk would like to speak.
Okay, go ahead.
I think this is one of those instances when we're interchanging policies and procedures.
Yes, absolutely.
We certainly want to have procedures that ensure hiring and retention of highly qualified staff, and we have a procedure for evaluation of staff. But I don't think it gets into the level of board-level policy. So I think that's just, this is coming from another state, as you stated. So that, in my mind, that's just a point to emphasize.
Absolutely.
And I think that I had a lot of I don't know. So good questions to ask, maybe future study sessions, just to get more information. But I
think that the I don't knows came from, I don't know if we have these policies, because we have procedures. So I think that's where the.
Yes,
That's
I
where
would
the
agree with
disconnect.
that. I would agree with that. And we've had a lot of staff turnover, so when we have those procedures,
Right.
I think that impacts the board's knowledge, because, we've
Well,
had some
a great example is, all right, we're talking, in a couple weeks, Caleb is going to come back and talk about strategies for, improvement.
Building improvement plans.
Part of, what's that?
Building improvement. See, now I know that these exist because I've been here
Right.
through enough cycles where we take the building improvement plans, which
Right.
come from
Right.
all of those evaluations, and then that helps
Right.
move us into our world's best workforce and all of our other legislative responsibilities.
I think I was, and I get that. I think for me, it was more of the safety, security risk. Like, I don't know those specifically, things like of that nature. I know generally what gets sent to me, but I'm not in the buildings, I don't understand every building's procedure on that.
Sure.
So,
Okay.
And with the safety security, that's one of the policies that we're currently reviewing. We just had our first reading at our last board meeting. So that's brand new, something that we would not have known about when we took this. And that's when we talked about the crisis management and different procedures at different high school, or the different schools. Each one has their own procedure. So that's just brand new information for us.
but I do agree with Dr. Funk. It was kind of like the procedure policy was, it was just not used maybe correctly. But I do want to point out, when we met with Barb Dorn, And we identified kind of just through her online tool, that obviously the strategic plan, the roles and responsibility of board members, the goals in the strategic plan, but then also the second standard was the school safety and security and the emotional and health and social needs of students. So some of these questions, maybe saying, I don't know, could have led into maybe some of those thoughts. If you don't know, maybe there's,
Right.
I don't know. I'm just theorizing perhaps on that, but.
Another thing too is, in the past superintendent evaluations, we've utilized MSBA's superintendent evaluation.
Okay.
3 years ago, I believe, but we revised a couple of language pieces in it. So it's pretty much the same, but those questions are all, those are all reflected in those, at superintendent evaluations. So again, I think coming on as an onboarding process, going through some of the statutes alone, and statutes that are the requirements for licensing holders and stuff, makes it very clear what the expectations are.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I will keep us moving on to page 17. And on this benchmark, under structure, under the standard of structure, it talks about the learning essentials. And so this is where we talk about the rigorous curriculum, technology, and the high quality facilities. I didn't have any specific comments on any of these, but how about from the group? Is there anything that you'd like to bring to the forefront and talk about? Again, there's a number of things here where it says policies, and the word procedure might be a more appropriate word than policy. And that would actually continue on to the next page with 2 questions. They fall under the same benchmark.
I think for me, one of my frustrations for this whole section is that we're academically failing our students, and there has not been any change. And so not seeing any change come forward from administration put towards the board or in how to reflect the failing academic high achievement and student achievement, I don't know. I mean, is there not? Because you're not seeing anything happen or any change, from year to year. So you kind of wonder if, is there anything there? Because I'm not seeing any consequence or accountability from the low academic achievement numbers.
I think for me, the hard part in some of that, and is just that and this is again as a community member, not, fortunately, we haven't been in a position to have to kind of, I just feel like when you cut, to expect better results when you're cutting curriculum or professional development, by near $1 million, it's like, what's the reasonable expectation that you're going to have of staff if you're cutting the different mechanisms that they would implement to better achievement? So I think it just comes with building, a lot of this, I think, with just is promoting some stability at the tenure in senior staffing positions so that there's stability at all levels, stability with the board, stability with the administration, stability just across the board, because I think it's, we had an achievement presentation, and I think it didn't necessarily surprise me what Dr. Funk said, but really just a lack of focus on investing in curriculum, which we control the budget. So, the board, not we, but the board controls the budget with the staff. So I guess for me, when we're not investing in professional development, when we're not investing in curriculum, and when we're turning over staff, all the time, I think you kind of reap what you sow a little bit. And so I just want to, it's kind of about, I think now we are all on the same page, and I think that we have an opportunity with a new superintendent, a new teaching and learning group, to really reinvest in what is going to help our students and their achievement.
I didn't see whose hand went up first there between Director Riley and
Tina
Director
can talk and then
Botava.
I'll.
So I just want to address that because that argument comes to this table a lot, and there's a lot of blame put on board members, past board members from board members that are current about turnover of administration. And I can tell you that our academics and our performance academically of our students, we're on the decline. And those were pieces that were of huge concern, and that administration did not support student growth and student achievement, and that administration overspent their budget.
So I
And
guess
that
I'm not
budget-
talking about, I'm talking about just the fact that my son had in K through 12 had he was leaving on his seventh superintendent. I'm not talking about any one particular superintendent. I'm just saying that there's a pattern from, if my son's leaving with, 6 superintendents, I just think that it's incumbent upon the organization to try to create an environment that might foster
Right,
some
but if your
stability.
organization was running smooth, your superintendent transition shouldn't shake the entire school every time there's a change. And again, we've been in the decline. I came on the board having to cut 2.1 from overspending. And there has to be a balance between what is in the budget and what we're spending on. And teachers go to college, and the curriculum comes into play. And all I saw at the beginning of my tenure on the board was a lot of excuses. What I heard from teachers is that they didn't want a lot of PD that didn't impact them directly in the classroom. And so, people can say what they want without having background information or direct knowledge as to what is going on. But I like to think of us like now we can move forward, right? We're all in the same place. We can stop going back and putting blame and having excuses. We can reflect on what's happened in the past to be able to move forward. But if we want to become a united community, we really have to stop putting it on everybody else.
If you felt like I said something, all I was saying, I think we do have unanimous agreement that we need to invest in professional development, curriculum, and focus on stability. I think we were all on board with what
Correct,
Dr.
but all I
Funk
hear
said.
is, we're cutting, and we're cutting this, and all that reflects into past board conversations of how we had no choice but to cut because we were left by an overspent administration. And so we need to be careful and considerate as to what professional development we put into place, the curriculum that we had put in, and that whole controversial matter. The author of that curriculum came out and said it didn't do what she intended to do. So then she offered to buy a support patch for it. I mean, there's all kinds of underlying things, but this board has a tendency to make this big grandiose statement of judgment on past boards, and we just needs to stop.
All I can do is speak for myself. I'm not judging any
I
past
don't
board.
think that's relevant to this
Right,
conversation.
I'm just
And
saying, I think we have a focus moving forward, and I think that we need to invest more in certain key areas that lend itself to improving student achievement, and that's professional development, curriculum. That's all I'm saying. I think we're on the same page here, so I don't.
And I'm going to spin off to keep us moving too. So I appreciate the discussion, and I think I've heard the word moving forward a couple
wanna
times.
say something.
And Director Botava, I was going to go to you. So yep, perfect,
Okay.
perfect. Thank you.
So when we talk about, do we have policies that ensure students receive the curriculum support and supplemental materials necessary for high achievement? I think if you are a standard student that's at the top, you receive that. And if you are a disabled student, like obviously disabled, then you receive help. But I think there's a lot of students in the middle that don't get the help, and they're just kind of put in this box of like the box, and it's good enough. And I don't think that's good enough. So that's one thing. And the other thing is I think our initial screenings are not sufficient and need to be looked at. And then we need to help kids and help them sooner, right away, rather than wait until they're 2 grade levels behind and then decide something's wrong. So I think that's a big problem in our school district. And I think doing the same things and expecting better results and paying lots of money for it doesn't make sense because it's not working. And I see that like this, like, I mean, I sat with and read with the lowest reading group for several years, and the whole thing is like, oh, you just have to read 10 minutes a day, all these kids 10 minutes a day. And that doesn't work for a lot of those kids. They needed assessments, they had other things going on, it needs to be addressed. And once it's addressed, those kids actually can succeed if you can do it before they feel like they're dumb because they're not succeeding. I just think sometimes that students are put in boxes, and once it's been decided what level they're at, they're just, it's just assumed, and they're just kind of tracked to that level, and they're not given, you know, real goals and like just like to really succeed. And I just think that's kind of something that does happen. And some of it is because people are overburdened. You have teachers who are way overburdened. You have guidance counselors who are way overburdened. Like the high school guidance counselors have some ridiculous amount of students that they're guiding, you know, that it's not even possible for them to guide all the students. So I understand why they do it, but I think that's a big part of why we don't see the achievement we need to see.
Gail, can I jump in?
Director
real
Hacker,
quick?
yes.
Real quick. Since curriculum policies have been coming up multiple times, and that's what these questions are on, I know from working on the policy committee that there has been a lot of work through the administration, kind of behind the scenes, that hasn't come to the board table yet in retooling our 600 series of policies. So that's stuff that is coming up really soon, and the administration is going to be presenting and kind of explaining the work that has been done. But there's a lot of community involvement with that, and going back to Director Riley's comment about some curriculum snafus in the past, like we're trying to learn from previous mistakes or accidents or whatever happened, and be more proactive in moving forward. And as a board, we are focused on our policy development. That's what we can do at the board level, and then it's up to the administration to really implement our vision and our policies to make sure that it is working. And then again, review it. If it didn't work, it comes back to us, and we need to kind of figure out how to tweak things. So I just wanted to bring that final point in there.
Okay, thank you very much. And we'll just continue on. So I think with structure, you probably have the idea, the things that you're talking about with physical organizational structure, and also knowing that these are topics that you'll probably be bringing back. A lot of these tie into the learning environments and student achievement as well. With that, I think we can probably move on to accountability, the fourth standard. And again, if anybody had any comments they wanted to make on any of the other statements, feel free.
I have
Go ahead, yes. Director Petrie.
No,
think
it's me,
or-
it's Vadava.
Oh, okay.
I think
Okay.
our long-term facilities plan and construction and maintenance should always, whenever there's construction on a building, there should be an assessment for energy efficiency as part of that construction. I think it should be part of our policy, and have Xcel Energy come in and do the assessment and then add, you know, like make sure if it can be added to a construction contract to do that, to do those things, because I think that would really help. It might help our budget quite a bit.
Good point. Very good, thank you. Under accountability, talking here about the continuous improvement, again with student achievement, the questions on page 21 all tie into your strategic plan. So things like doing a timely review of your strategic plan once it's in place, coherence between the plan and school improvement, and then the annual review as well. So that's what you see in question 51, 52, 53. And then on page 22, accountability, and these all relate to superintendent hiring, superintendent goals, superintendent evaluation. So I don't know that I need to spend a whole lot of time on this because I know that you've worked closely with my colleague Barb Dorn. So you have probably heard all this before. So I'm not sure. Any specific questions that I can answer? I think the key is that you do an evaluation, that you have a tool, that you are the only group, the board evaluates the superintendent and not doing a 360 or have any other input, and goals based on the strategic plan, kind of the key takeaways. Any questions, comments about that?
You know, Gail, my only comment goes back to, and this is just to have, open up the lines for a conversation, but I think,
Sure.
and this goes past the strategic plan once we develop it, because that seems to be like, and maybe it's just because I have been on the community and I'm only not even 2 years, on the board. But I think that as a board, I would like to see us, with the superintendent, continually revisit the plan and have
Yes.
more meat to the plan. I mean, it seems like, I don't know if you go into like Portrait of a Graduate. I love Portrait of a Graduate. I think it's a nice, visual but for me, it doesn't seem to drill down enough where I feel like, what can we hold people accountable to? Or what are the benchmarks? Or, and how should that just be the world's best workforce? Or I just think that there should be maybe, as a part of the strategic plan, some conversation about those benchmarks and those accountability measures that we can, as a board, work with staff to measure.
Yep, absolutely. And I think when you work on your strategic plan, usually when I'm working with a school district, we will identify 3 to 5 focus areas, and that becomes your direction. I know when I worked with like Forest Lake, Moorhead, Winona, they each came up with, I think, 3 to 6 focus areas. Once you have that plan in place, that really gives you direction as a board. And I don't leave a school until we know that strategic plan is going to be a living, breathing document that you use. And not only you, but all of your stakeholders. So staff are engaged, students are engaged in it, community members, alumni. And then as a board, it's easy as new board members join the team because you've already got this plan in place and you can explain where it came from and how it got there. And it's a nice alignment because your focus for a particular year will become the superintendent's goals. They'll become your goals, and there's no surprises. So hopefully that adds to what some of your thoughts were with that. Okay. I'm going to move us along to page 23 under accountability. And all of these questions talk about the student academic progress. And again, it's similar to what we've talked about already. Obsess on the results with students. And as a high-performing board, you end up moving in that direction. I know in the past years, you're not unlike any other school in the state of Minnesota where that focus has kind of slipped away because of all the other things happening. But the movement should be back on the student academic progress. Any questions about accountability or comments? I will move us on to the advocacy and communication, which is the last standard. And with this one, let's see. On question 62, the advocating on the local, state, and federal levels, remember that that's one of the functions of our governmental relations team at MSBA. So you have that built in, and I'm sure that you have some other opportunities for doing that as well. Question 65 ties into responding to questions from community members, citizens, kind of goes back to those written protocols that we talked about in question 11. And so how are those questions answered when they come from a stakeholder? Any thoughts, any feedback from the group, any comments on any of these benchmark statements. Question 66 on the next page talks about the public being informed of the board's roles and responsibilities. And at MSBA, we always talk about having an elevator speech, similar to, I think the gentleman, is it Brandon? The gentleman in our video at MSBA who is in the grocery store and the constituent approaches him. And so having that elevator speech of explaining what the chain of command is and who they can talk to if they have a concern, and that as board members, I had no power until I got to the board table, and then our voice was there at the board table. So helping the community members understand that we can't fix something on our own or change it, and how that process is addressed. And I'm going to let you take a look at these other questions if there's anything else that you would like to comment on. I usually like to mention on page 27 the benchmarks of 70 and 71. And I think the point being kind of goes back to when we talked about gathering information. So I think it is important, and I think it was Director Riley who said that, you've had opportunities over your years to have groups come in and provide information. So I do think it's important as board members that we seek community and staff ideas, feedback, input on topics. At the same time, help them understand that when you're seeking that, thank you, we're going to take that into consideration, so that I don't get the impression that just because I gave a certain idea or shared a certain idea that that's what the board's going to do or that's what the board member's going to do. But definitely seeking out that input, and then as you come back to the board table, carefully consider not only my feedback, but the feedback that all of you have brought to the table from stakeholders. And I think that's an important part of what we do as board members. Any comments, feedback on the advocacy and communication? Anything that, as we visited this evening, relates, but we didn't necessarily talk about it, that you'd like to bring to the table?
Superintendent Fung? Do you have anything?
No, I just thanks, Gail. I think it gives the board a baseline. I also appreciate particularly the discussion on the written protocols, who does what, et cetera. I think that's going to be really helpful for the board moving forward here. And, whether the board chooses to, do the paid version or the free one moving forward, this establishes a baseline for them as far as something to look at from year to year as we move forward here. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I have one thing, question 65, where it says we have an effective process for responding to questions and concerns and comments. I
Yes.
I think it does happen, but I don't know if I ever knew what the process was, so I don't know, I don't think we have a written process for that, or.
Right, and that's part of what I think she brought up earlier was something to consider. I mean, yeah, so.
I just don't know, it did, makes you a little worried to respond to emails sometimes, because you don't know, who's supposed to be responding.
And I think usually the response from MSBA on this one is, if you get the email and it does not appear that anyone else has received it, so if I sent you the email, you could just reply and say, Gail, thank you so much for contacting me. I'm CCing our superintendent, Mr. Funk, on this reply, and he will follow up with you. If the email comes to the board chair and it's obvious that excuse me, that all board members have received it, then it's just unspoken that the board chair will give that same response. So usually a short and sweet response. If somebody emails you and says, can you tell me what day, who's the community ed director? I want to sign up for classes. Yeah, I would say as board members, go ahead and answer those kinds of things. But when it's things tied into operations, chain of command, issues, challenges, then I would just forward them on. So that's usually our messaging. Each board handles it differently. I know there are some boards where, sorry, Chair Sherman, but I know there are some boards where only the board chair responds, and I know there are some board chairs who receive like 100 or more emails on any given day. And then there are others where everything gets forwarded to the superintendent. So it's really what your protocol is.
One other thing, sorry, I keep saying these things, but I think we also have to do a better job of outreach to different communities. I just think we get input, but it's all from the same people all the time, rather than from, there's communities we just don't hear from, and somehow we need to start connecting with those communities better.
Good point. And being very intentional about it.
Okay, and as we're wrapping up, so there's 71 questions, and it kind of seems like they all have an equal weight as far as the survey goes. And there's a kind of a spread on all the questions. None of the questions kind of have a unanimous answer. But also, of the 71 questions, some of them just might be more of a concern than others. And I think that's one thing we didn't get at here is, okay, now that we got these answers, which ones worry you that we're not doing or we are doing? And maybe that could be a follow-up somehow, but I think that's probably the one thing we're missing here.
Good point. Good point. Does anybody have any other thoughts on that? Because I will certainly send a summary of my notes of the things that we've kind of highlighted here. Are there any that you want to just state right now that, yeah, this is a real high priority, something we really want to work on?
To me, I'll be interested to see where we are next year in some of these questions with the strategic plan, because I think for me, I'd like to work on the vision and accountability piece. But I think so much of that is contingent on the strategic plan that we haven't started yet.
Right.
That's expiring. So I guess for me, it's a little bit of a wait and see. But I do think we can continually be looking at our onboarding binder and making sure we're reflecting on that, like which we are and all the time, I know, but just adding some other processes and making sure that it doesn't get out of date, that sort of thing.
I do think that is your big takeaway. If you had a strategic plan in place, I think the whole set of responses would be very, very different. Even though you would still be working on particular goals, I just think that brings it together. I know when I do the strategic planning process, this is actually the last step of the process. We come back in a final review and then of the process, and then we look at this evaluation and we tie everything together. So you've got that, that board superintendent team commitment to the process, and then you can, on the ongoing basis, do your assessment. I agree with Superintendent Funk. I think that, you've had this facilitated in service. Another year, you might not need that. I have some schools I've worked with 4 and now 5 years where that's just kind of an annual thing that they do, and they do the facilitated process. I've had some schools where they do, maybe every other year or every third year, but yet they still take the evaluation and then they review it on their own at a work session. So I think this process, however it fits for you, will serve you well, whatever your needs are. And then, of course, at MSBA, we're here to help you out in whatever way you need. On that.
Great. Thank you so much, Gail. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure. And I just want to say, again, thank you so much, board and superintendent, because you have broad shoulders and you wear many hats. And so thank you for all the work that you do and all the commitment. And your school district is very lucky to have all of you. So thank you. Stay in touch, too, if I can help you in any way. And I will get that summary put together and send it to your board chair and your superintendent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much.
All right. That concludes our study session. So if there aren't any other comments, we're adjourned. Thank you.